Hey folks, Taylor here. Before we get to my conversation with ESPN's Jeff Carlisle about the U.S. soccer presidential elections, I wanted to let you know that today's show is brought to you by Fuchi, makers of the highly engineered soccer rebounder that combines soccer and squash. It's pretty outstanding. You can play by yourself. You can play with a partner. You can play with a group of people. It's good for like tailgating, pre-gaming, whatever you want to go with, especially with the weather being halfway decent nowadays, at least here in Virginia. More excuses than ever to break out your Fuchi. Also wanted to let you know that they've got a whole new line of apparel for you to check out. They've got hats, shirts, much, much more. Best of all, our listeners can get 15% off any Fuchi item using the promo code TSS2018. That's all jumbled together, capital TSS 2018. And that, of course, will get you 15% off any order. A link to their site will be in today's show notes. Thank you as ever to Fuchi for sponsoring today's program. Now, on with the show. Hello and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. I'm Taylor Rockwell, and I am once again without Daryl Grove. He's preparing for our indoor game, which is happening in the very, very near future. But I am in the office because there's stuff happening in Orlando. The U.S. Soccer Federation presidential election is tomorrow. That would be Saturday, February 10th, for those of you listening after the fact. But there's been lots of confusing stuff going on down in Florida. There are gangs of sixes, there are establishment twos, there are cryptic tweets and backroom chatting. It doesn't quite necessitate an emergency podcast, but we wanted to be as informed as possible heading into the big day. So I called up ESPN's Jeff Carlisle to find out what's been happening. He's on the ground in Orlando and has the knowledge you, and I guess we, need. So, with that said, joining me now, I've got my friend and yours. It's Mr. Jeff Carlisle. Jeff, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Yeah, Taylor, no problem.
First of all, I like that I've decided to make you friends with all of our listeners. That seems fair. Second of all, it's late in the... Yeah, it's good. Late-ish in the afternoon, evening on Friday. The election is, I think, like less than 18 hours away. No one seems entirely sure when the actual voting begins. What is the mood like down in Orlando?
This afternoon it was a little bit kind of the lull before the storm. You did see some candidates, making their pitch to voters. You saw that in the hotel lobby. The Athletes Council just finished meeting. I'm told that they're going to meet again later tonight. So it's it's getting down to the nitty gritty here. Just talking to some of the other voters, a lot of them haven't made up their mind yet. I mean, at least that's what they're saying outwardly. I think a lot of people are just kind of keeping their cards close to the chest. So, but it's a little calm. I think it'll start to ramp up a little bit later tonight. You'll see some people really starting to have some intense discussions, and a little bit like it was last night. When I arrived at about 11 o'clock, I wasn't sure how many people would still be in the hotel bar, but quite a few people were, and there were quite a few things going on. So I anticipate it'll be the same tonight.
I was very curious about that. I want to get into all of like the gang of sixes and the establishment duo as well. But first, I wanted to ask. I've heard a couple different people talking about how there are just kind of like members of the Athletes Council hanging out. There are different voters hanging out. There are different candidates there. What does it look like when they're making their pitch? I'm assuming it's not like a big stump speech with a bunch of fanfare. Is it just like quiet conversations over a drink, or is it very obvious that some campaigning is happening?
I'd say. The conversations are a little animated. It's an intense process, and I saw Carlos Cordeiro in the lobby today, for example. Trying to make his pitch to a couple of voters, and he was very intense and very focused. It looked like. Obviously, I wasn't close enough to hear what was going on, but I think it's very serious. I think. Yeah, there is a lot at stake in this election. I mean, I don't think it's quite going to be Armageddon if a certain candidate wins. I mean, the game is, I think, a lot more resilient than people give it credit for. But certainly this is a unique opportunity, I think, because whenever you have a failure like the U.S. did at the World Cup, it is an opportunity for introspection, and there's a little bit more momentum to institute reform than there normally is. And I think ahead of the opportunity to win the hosting rights of the 2026 World Cup, I think if the U.S. can start now, make some changes that will be effective, I think when 2026 rolls around, that can be just a massive springboard. And if the U.S. has more of its house in order, I think the impact could be even greater than what one might think. Just looking at those reforms in isolation. So I think there is a real opportunity here. So again, we'll see what happens with the votes tomorrow and how it all plays out. I suspect that it's going to be Kathy Carter or Carlos Cordeiro who are going to prevail. That just seems to be the way the winds are blowing at the moment.
That has been my feeling for the past couple days. It does sound like maybe the 6 outsider candidates, if that's how they want to be framed, had some conversations last night. Sounded like there was going to be a very dramatic document unveiling or announcement today. What is the latest when it comes to that group of candidates potentially combining votes, or maybe just saying that they're all in favor of change?
Well, you have to remember it's hard to get 6 people to agree on anything, much less in the middle of an election.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's what they're running up against here. It's one kind of amendment that some candidates wanted made to the document was that after the first round, whoever the top vote getter was amongst the reform-minded candidates. Mm-hmm. Everyone, the remaining 5 would throw all of their votes behind that one, that top vote getter within that group. So, and I think that's a little hard for some other candidates to swallow. I think when you've come this far and done as much work as a lot of these candidates have done, you don't want to just give up your presidential hopes after one ballot. So I think that, to a great extent, that's what is really the big stumbling block here. But, we'll see. We'll see if they're able to either come up with a plan of attack, for tomorrow, or if it ends up being just kind of a really watered down version that, on the one hand, while everyone agrees to it, on the other, it doesn't really have much impact. So, we'll see what comes out of it. I was told as of late this afternoon that they were still working on it. It was still possible, but they're going to have to, at some point, you're going to reach a point of no return here where, putting out this kind of document is going to be less and less impactful. So, we'll see how it goes.
I did want to ask, do you have an idea, or has there been some speculation as to who the individuals are who have, the reform candidates who have embraced that idea of whoever has the most votes, that's who everybody supports? And maybe do you have an idea of who didn't like that idea?
I haven't been able to pin that down. Mm-hmm. I do get the sense that there is some friction between the Martino and Ronaldo camps. That has been kind of percolating, below the surface, I think, for a while now. So I'm not sure, which of those candidates falls on, which side of the spectrum here with regard to that particular issue. But there has been some tension, between, those two camps. And but who knows? Maybe it's just a situation where one of the other candidates just doesn't want to back out. Yeah. So a lot of egos involved here. Again, a lot of work as well, and it's tough to maybe toss that away. After one ballot tomorrow.
Yeah, and I know it's easy for me to say this from 1,000 miles away without any real stake in this, but it is a little bit frustrating just because if you're trying to campaign as the outsider candidate, the reform candidate who's going to bring about change, it does feel a little bit like this is the opportunity for all of them to get together, because otherwise if you're, say, the athletes council and you're looking at these 6 people who are arguing over who is the best one to lead, and then you look at Kathy Carter and Carlos Cordeiro and they seem pretty stable, it does make me wonder if maybe that athletes council is more inclined than it was, say, yesterday to vote as a bloc.
Well, that's tough to say. I mean, the word consensus is being bandied about, but it's also a secret ballot. So, I mean, there's nothing to stop someone from voting their conscience if that's what they feel they have to do. So it's, like I said, I mean, we'll see what kinds of things, come out of their meeting later tonight, because they are meeting again. So yeah, it's been a crazy process for sure. But at this point, I think Cordeiro and Carter are really kind of duking it out for the athletes council. And, maybe Martino was able to throw a wedge in there and siphon away a few votes, but it's I think he's got it's an uphill climb for him for sure. And like I said earlier, I think Carter's got the inside track here.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about Kathy Carter for a second and that inside track because Carlos Cordeiro obviously announced his candidacy before Sunu Gulati said he wasn't going to be running. Seems like Kathy Carter has been the beneficiary of that. She obviously has been endorsed or will likely get the Major League Soccer votes. Sounds like she'll also get NWSL. Do you think Carlos Cordeiro has any hope of peeling off any of that like professional council vote, maybe with the USL, or does it seem like Kathy Carter has most of those votes locked up?
Oh, I think the USL is really the only constituency that he can hope to garner on the pro council. I've been told that MLS is all in for Kathy Carter. I mean, that's who. It's been clear from the outset that she was going to champion the cause of MLS. For better or for worse. Depending on which part of the philosophical spectrum you sit on. But yeah, it's going to be tough for Cordeiro to get any kind of support out of that. And I think, with the NWSL, I mean, there is momentum. There is this idea to get behind a woman candidate. I mean, there have not been that many women who have been the head of soccer federations around the world. It has been done before in some places, but it is extremely rare. And there, one of the criticisms of the USSF is that it's not diverse enough in terms of the workforce and the people in the organization with access to power and influence. That's a separate, and that's looking at it separately from the board of directors, because there are some women, there are some independent directors who sit on that. But so there is this kind of impetus to have, in some circles, to have a woman president. And so, but getting back to your original point, it in terms of the pro council, I think it's going to, Cordeiro really ought to be looking elsewhere to try to get his votes. I mean, yes, the USL is one opportunity, but beyond that, I don't think he's got any shot there.
So it sounds like basically he's going to be aggressively pursuing as many of the youth council and adult council votes as possible. That seems like a tricky proposition, given that there are several hundred of those votes to be had.
Yeah, it's a lot more legwork. And then that's why I think the Athletes Council is such a rich it's such a rich source of support, because you're talking about 20 people. And actually it's going to be less than that on the floor tomorrow, because Leslie Osborne just had a baby. Brad Guzan is in training camp with Atlanta United, so I'm told that he's not here. Heather O'Reilly did make it, I'm told. So, we'll see, how things play out. But you get a lot of bang for the buck, with the Athletes Council, if you can secure those votes. Lobbying the state associations is a lot of intense work. And then there's some of the national associations like AYSO, U.S. Club Soccer, and the like. There you get a little bit more, you get a little bit more return for your effort. But again, it's not as potent, it's not as powerful as the Athletes Council. So, that's why that particular constituency is lobbied so hard.
So it sounds then like we're in a situation where Kathy Carter has a decent percentage of the pro council vote. It seems like maybe she's doing pretty well with the Athletes Council. So if she's like the definite front runner, do you think there's any chance that of the reform candidates, somebody we haven't been discussing, like say a Steve Gans or a Michael Winograd, like becomes maybe a consensus because people can't agree? Or do you think right now it is like the major names, essentially Carlos Cordeiro, Kathy Carter, Cal Martino, and maybe Eric Winalda?
I think Winalda's, fading a little bit. It looked like he had stabilized in recent days, but I think that was kind of maybe his supporters trying to buck up his candidacy. I hear he has no support in the Athletes Council, which has got to be, as a former athlete, that's got to be a blow to him. And it's certainly, practically speaking, it's a blow to his chances. So I really think it's a 2-candidate race with Martino still in with the shout, to try to, upset the apple cart. I mean, I do think it's important for Carter. I think she's got to get over the line on the first or second ballot. And if this starts going to 3 and 4 ballots, then it's going to start getting really crazy. And, you're going to have a little bit of even gridlock maybe because, no one's going to think that, hey, everyone's going to think, hey, my candidate still has a shot. So, they're going to stick with it, longer than they might otherwise. So, but everyone is expecting, I think a week ago, single ballot election was thought to be highly unlikely, but now it's becoming more and more likely. And if that doesn't happen, then a lot of people think that Carter is going to get through in the second ballot.
Mm-hmm. So then what does the rest of your evening and morning look like? Are you anticipating a lot of sleep, or do you think it is going to slow down as we get closer and closer to the beginning of the election?
Oh, no, I'm not going to get a lot of sleep. I think I got 3-4 hours last night. So it wouldn't, we'll see what happens, tomorrow and then later tonight. But yeah, obviously, if everyone's going to have their eye out on the athletes council and what they decide. They are the kingmakers, or maybe the queen makers in the case of Kathy Carter. They are going to they're going to have a huge say in what happens tomorrow.
And are you anticipating that they will try to keep it pretty tight-lipped when it comes to their the way they're leaning this evening? Do you think they'll try to keep it secret right up until the time that they cast their ballots?
That depends. I mean, it depends on how united they are. I mean, if it ends up being fragmented, I could see people starting to leak out, what they're going to do as a means of kind of propelling their candidates' chances further. So, if they're able to come to a consensus, I can see them kind of keeping it tight-lipped. But if there's some people angry about the decision that was made, I could see things starting to splinter a little bit.
So what else were you mostly trying to keep up with the candidates today? Talk to some of the delegates. Were you able to attend any of the other sessions? Were you in on the board meeting, or has it been mostly doing the legwork to see what everybody's up to in their candidacies?
Yeah, it's been talking to the candidates and some of their their campaign workers, who are trying to get their message out. I did attend a little bbit of the board meeting. That was a little bit anticlimactic. Sunil Gulati did make some parting shots, in his last board meeting as USSF president. But it's been basically a lot of walking around, and sometimes you just stumble across people that you didn't anticipate you would run into, and they're able to give you some insight. So it's been talking to some candidates, it's been talking to some voters, it's been talking to some representatives of the various campaigns. So, that's kind of what my day has been like.
And if Kathy Carter gets it on that first ballot, is there a chance that we see Sunil Gulati hands raised above his head running around Eric Winalda, or do we think he's maybe just going to fade quietly into the evening?
I think he's going to be pretty composed about the whole affair. I mean, I'm sure if Carter wins, he'll be happy. His preferred candidate will have won, and I think it'll be a little bit of a relief. I mean, for Gulati, if you look at it from his perspective, he's worked, for decades to try to grow the federation, to try to grow the sport. And I think he would have had some serious concerns if, one of his least favored candidates, or if one of his least favorite candidates actually ended up winning this thing. That's looking less and less likely, that one of those least favored is going to win. So, I think he'll get some quiet satisfaction. I don't think he's going to do a knee slide on the ballroom floor, but I think he'll be a pleased individual. If tomorrow goes like I think it will.
So final question before I let you go. You wrote a great primer for ESPN. You guys also had the full Q&A with all of the candidates, but you I believe you had the percentage chance of each candidate next to their name. Mm-hmm. If you were to update that. I'm not trying to make you do math on the fly because that's not something I could do. But say if you looked at Carter, Cordeiro, and Martino, if you were to adjust them, would you say it's 70, 20, 10 at this point?
I would say it's more like 50, I'd say 50, 25, 15.
Okay.
I'd say that's about where we stand.
Okay. So, all right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see how that progresses tomorrow. Jeff, last thing I did want to say, if people want to follow you, I'm sure you're going to be tweeting and writing more about the election as we lead up to it and then get through it. How can they follow you?
They can follow me on Twitter at Jeffrey Carlisle. They can follow me on ESPN.com. It's a little bit different navigation now. The old ESPN FC domain, I think, is no longer. So they have to go to ESPN.com/soccer. And then they should be able to find my work. They might have to go to the search bar and they can just type in my name and some of my articles should come up.
Beautiful. All right. Well, Jeff, I'll let you get back to it. I'm sure you've got your notepad out ready to go. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
All right. Thanks, Taylor.